Welcome to Beat Diabetes, and I promise, I'm going to stop talking about Sarah Hallberg and this book, Status Quo Thinking is Harming Your Health. But there was just a little bit more I wanted to share. Actually, in this video, we're going to talk about the book about half the time, and then about the other half of the video, I'll just get into some of my own thoughts and want to answer the question, what are the two worst words you can hear when someone is trying to convince you to move a certain direction in terms of your diet in order to beat diabetes? Now, Sarah Hallberg started out thinking she'd be a cardiologist, and then she dabbled with the idea of becoming a veins doctor, and ultimately became a PCP, a primary care physician. And then they asked her to head an obesity clinic, and that's what she ended up doing. But shortly after that, she got fascinated by the whole area of metabolic syndrome and diabetes and how to conquer diabetes. And she found, as she did research, that nothing succeeds in beating diabetes like a low carbohydrate diet. And so I wanted to share a couple of the thoughts she had. She describes how shocked she was, not just to see that low carb helps in the area of diabetes. Almost everybody knows that. There's a few holdouts that are just so strongly partisan in terms of their approach, so much attached to their ideology about diet, they won't even admit that. But anybody else, any reasonable person will tell you that, yeah, if you cut your carbs, you should see a reduction in your glucose and as well your insulin. But the thing that surprised her was not only did it help, but just how fast the process worked. She was prepared to see some improvement. She was not prepared to see how radically powerful and quick this improvement came about. So let me just share a couple of her thoughts. She said, to be honest, I was unprepared for such profound results with diabetes and for it to happen so soon. It rocked my world. I was genuinely stunned by how quickly some of the significant positives occurred. And she found they could not keep people on their previous insulin levels and diabetic med levels. They had to pull them off or they would have hypos and it wouldn't be safe. So they had to watch carefully. And that's one thing that always makes me nervous when I recommend a low-carb diet. It's like if you're on high-powered meds, diabetic meds, and if you're on insulin, you're going to have to be careful, or you'll end up falling on the floor in a coma of low blood sugar. So anyway, here's what she said about that. She says, we were pulling people off hundreds of units of insulin within weeks. Patient after patient was reversing. She says reversing, not merely managing, their way out of the world's most serious, consequential chronic diseases. Their diabetes was going away. And when you read that, you can just almost hear the shock in her voice. She's like, man, we sure didn't expect results this good, this powerful, this fast. And it was like, I never really realized you can reverse diabetes. You can get better instead of worse, because all the powers that be, all the so-called experts in the diabetes world are telling you you'll never get better. You'll always get worse. It is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. Just hope that you can hang on until the dear end of things. And she's like, they're not getting worse. When we cut their carbs, they're getting better. And then she says something that tells how it was that she became so obsessed with the whole idea of beating diabetes. She says almost overnight, the goal of our clinic focused more on diabetes than on weight management. Yet another pivot in my medical trajectory. Another pivot. When she had her eyes opened to just how powerful a low-carb approach is and how fast it works, and how that you can reverse your diabetes until you go into the doctor and he says, well, you've got an A1C of 5.4. I can't call you a diabetic anymore. If he's got enough sense, he'll say something like that. You were at 9.0, and they all told you were definitely diabetic. You were way over the line into diabetes. Now you're at 5.4, 5.2, 5.6, and they're like, well, by the A1C score, you're not diabetic. You've reversed something. Some people argue, well, you're not really reversing it because you're eating differently, as though that somehow disqualifies you and it takes away your right to rejoice. Yeah, but you're eating differently. You're eating low carb. Of course, your blood sugar went down. Of course, your A1C went down. Of course, your triglycerides went down, but you did it the wrong way. Now you go back and you just eat the way you did and see if you can really reverse things. Be kind of like telling a person who weighs 450 pounds and now they're down to 175 and they don't eat nearly as much, and saying to that person formerly obese, well, you're still obese. You just cheated because you don't eat so much anymore. Well, that's ridiculous. And they may say, well, yeah, but if you go back and eat the way you used to, you'll be obese again. Well, yeah, you would, but so what? Anyway, she found that out. Then she had another life-changing experience. And they just keep coming in her life. You get the idea she was being led by divine providence. How much she knew of that or how much she believed in it, I can't say. But I just get the feeling God was leading her. And what happened was she was at a conference and she met with, I believe it was Stephen Finney and Jeff Volek, or one of the two. And they got to talking and she asked some questions. They asked her what she was doing. She told about her low-carb approach and her clinic, how she was seeing people beat diabetes, how she was seeing people reverse diabetes. And they were telling about their results, and they got so fascinated. They said, let's have dinner and talk this out some more. And so she and one of her associates, and I think it was Steve Finney, got together, and they spent like 2.5 hours talking over dinner, long dinner, about how to beat diabetes and the results they're having. And at the end of the time, Steve Finney tells her, we're starting a new program. We want to study diabetes. We know it works. We want to learn all the particulars, all the details, and figure this out and get the research done on real people, not just have a theory, but real people and real results. They were seeing them, but they hadn't quantified it. They hadn't put it in terms of a scientific study. They were like, would you consider leading this process? Would you consider being the lead investigator, the lead doctor in this new company we're forming? And she just jumped at it. She sent an email to her husband and said, my life just changed tonight. And sure enough, it did. Now, let me talk for a minute about the problem and one of the things that's holding people back from beating diabetes. Part of it is just ignorance. But part of it is confusion, because you've got people saying, if you will just lower your fats and quit eating all animal products, boom, diabetes is over. Of course, that's not true. That's a great theory. It doesn't happen to be true, and it's easy to prove. Just try it. Cut your fats way down. Eat lots of carbs, and don't eat any animal fats. The theory is it's the animal fats that get into your body and jam up all your cells, and they make you fat, and they make you diabetic. And if you stop eating the animal fats and the animal products and just eat all plant food, whole food, plant-based foods, all will be well. If that were true, that would mean I would never hear from any vegetarians or vegans saying, I've become diabetic. I hear from them frequently. So obviously that cannot be true. Evidence shows it's not true. The two words that ought to send off a buzzer and ought to show you a big red flag. The two words you don't want to hear somebody say, and maybe I've said them in the past, so I'm not going to try to pretend that I've never said them, but the two words you really don't want to hear when someone is trying to prove a point, and there are all kinds of people trying to prove all kinds of points. Some will try to prove that all plant foods are evil. and plants have anti-nutrients, and plant foods are unnatural. You were never made to eat plants. Man is a carnivore. Man is not a plantivore. And then there's others that say the exact opposite. You were made to eat plants. You were never made to eat animals. Eating animals is unnatural. It's cruel. It's not good for the environment, and it's just flat wrong. And people will tell you all kinds of things. And one of the ways they'll try to easily prove their point is to use these two words: studies show. Well, studies show, blah, 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 blah. And then they'll try to prove their point. They won't tell you which studies show this, nor will they tell you what kind of studies they were. And oftentimes when people will say studies show, what they're talking about is some kind of a quote study where they ask people, well, do you eat this? Yeah. How's your health? Well, not so good. Ha ha. Let me give you an example of a study that would be absolutely meaningless and worthless. Let's suppose I go through the whole city of Dallas. I question thousands and thousands of people. Not that I'd have time to do that, but let's suppose I did. And I want to know two things. Do you eat at least 3 apples per week? And then another question is, do you eat at least 3 hot dogs per week? And I find groups, now if they neither of those is true, I just forget about them. But I find groups where people eat 3 or more apples every week, and another group where they eat 3 or more hot dogs every week. And I find out when I test them that the ones that eat the apples every week are much healthier than the ones that eat the hot dogs every week. And maybe they've got lower A1Cs, and maybe they live longer. They're eating the 3 apples per week, and the others are eating the 3 hot dogs per week. Have I proved anything? The answer is no. Dennis, you haven't proved a single thing. There's all kinds of confounding variables in that. Number one, just by asking someone a question doesn't even mean they can accurately answer it or will accurately answer it. But even beyond that, let's say they're all telling the truth. Yes, I eat 3, 4, 5, 6 apples a week. Yes, I eat 3, 4, 5, 6 hot dogs a week. Hot dogs have such a terrible reputation that anybody that eats 3, 4, 5 hot dogs per week is likely poor and uneducated, quite likely to be overweight, quite likely to never work out at the gym, to just be totally unconcerned with health, because almost everybody believes hot dogs are one of the worst foods you can eat. Now, I honestly don't believe that. They're not the best. I don't think they're the worst. If someone gave me a couple of hot dogs without the buns, or gave me a couple of donuts, I'd choose the hot dogs without the buns every time. But nevertheless, hot dogs have such a terrible reputation that the people who eat lots of hot dogs, chances are, don't give a hoot about their health. And the people that eat lots of apples, chances are they do care about their health. They've heard that apples are good for you. Apples have a good reputation. So they're likely to live longer, to be healthier. They're more likely to work out at the gym. They're more likely to turn down the sugary foods, the donuts, and so forth. But that study means nothing. The only study that would really count is if you took people that eat the same diet and you said, all right, for the next 5 years, I want you to eat 5 more apples every week. And then you took another group that had formerly eaten the same way. You say, I want you to eat 5 or more hot dogs every week. And then you compare the results. That could show something. But just to ask somebody, do you eat 5 or more or 3 or more hot dogs every week or apples, doesn't prove a single thing. Most of the studies that people will try to point you to low fat are those kind of studies. They're observational studies. They're questionnaires. They mean nothing. So when someone says studies show, and sometimes they've just heard something. They can't even remember where they heard it, when they heard it, what exactly it was, but they will throw those 2 magic words, studies show, and boom, they expect you to believe them. Ah, yes, master, studies show, studies show. I don't want to hear what studies show. Tell me the study. Tell me what kind of a study it was. I used to have a science teacher in the 8th grade, I think it was, or maybe the 9th. He used to say, figures don't lie, but liars figure. Well, the point he was making was there are some people that are determined to prove a point, and they will stretch things and they'll manipulate the figures until it proves exactly what they wanted to prove. Now, maybe that's a little bit harsh. I think most of the people into the low-fat, plant-based movement are not liars, are decent people, but they're highly committed to their ideology. And in some cases, their diet is almost their religion. Folks, my diet is not my religion. My religion is God and his son, Jesus Christ. But anyway, you cannot simply pull out of the air studies show. Do you need more information and inspiration about beating diabetes? The very first line of our description is nearly always a link to our hundreds of videos toward that one subject, how to beat diabetes. Click on that link and start watching these videos. You'll be blessed and, I believe, greatly helped.